Hi friends, welcome to the 10 Laws with East Forest podcast. I'm East Forest. This episode's coming out a day later than normal on Wednesday. We normally release this on Tuesday in honor of the Blackout Tuesday in the music industry yesterday. And I actually had recorded an intro for this on the weekend to keep this, coming out on a timely manner. And I felt it was appropriate and important for me to redo that and change the release of just this podcast just to address more of this intense change that's going on in our country, in the world, and in our hearts. To be honest with you, I'm not super active on social media. I do tend to keep up with the news, but things are moving so quickly as they have been that I don't want to say like I have some answer or treatise or even a fullness of my own response, but I did feel called to say something because I felt like that is what's being called of us right now. And from my own experience of what's happening, from my own enclave right now in Boise, Idaho, which is a very peaceful, small enclave, and I was planning on heading down to Boulder, Utah, to my spot down there to live and do work for the next few weeks, which is even more of a place not really in the mix of things physically. I want to do what I can in this moment to speak to these times from my perspective as Krishna. I am in total support of the change that is happening, and I'm outraged as well, and I feel we are reaching a boiling point. People of color are deeply disadvantaged. I mean, the privilege that is in our country and that I've experienced myself is like baked into the foundation of this country. From the very beginning, we started this country, the wealth was built on slavery, largely from slaves from Africa. And we're still reverberating from these actions like extremely loudly. And it's not just those actions, as we all know. It's been, just infinite things have happened since then that continue to happen to this day that do need to change. And in my own ways, I can't not be seeped in that privilege. I mean, I don't think East Forest would exist. Honestly, if I think about my ability as just growing up, being able to be ensconced in the arts in school and to make the choices I wanted to make and be able to be educated and learn skills and then become an artist and even being able to choose that, let alone all the other different ways that have led to me being where I am. And I often try to, like with my work, and my personal interest is often like the upper octaves of our consciousness and our experience. Like what is sort of the resonance above it all that ties it together. And that's a lot of the reasons why typically I don't get into ground level political action. Typically, I'm very interested in it, but I don't tend to make that what my project is about because I'm trying to think about often, if we keep peeling back the layers of the onion, is there something we can find and maybe work on that seed or that source or the resonance above it all that perhaps will engender like these systemic shifts. And I've always believed those shifts happen from the personal level, like from the inside out, from the individual. But no doubt these things are complicated, and no doubt we do need systems change, and no doubt this could be a moment where it's looking like we could get some of those. I mean, our world and our society is going through an apocalypse, an unveiling, a falling apart, and that is troubling and saddening and no doubt difficult. But it's also beautiful and important and needed. And we have to clear the ground, like when you burn the field, to fertilize it so something new can be born. And I feel like it's happening. And it's a combination of a momentum and a reckoning, and it's a combination of people choosing to stand up and make that change, because that's the only way it happens. I don't know where it all leads. None of us do, but we do know that the time is now. So I'll admit that this process, because I'm sort of, I'm a solo artist in COVID times, so I'm essentially talk about being isolated. You're seeing a lot of this from the outside, and I'm now looking to myself and saying, well, what are the ways that I can come from these upper octaves of my own mind and see what can be done on the ground? There are ways that my actions can be more physical. There are ways that my voice could be more specific. And I don't have the answers right now for what all that will be, but I have my own intention to say, like, that's needed for me. And that I have my blind spots just like everybody. And I want to do better because I want to see a more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, as our friend Charles says, Charles Eisenstein. I can do better. And it's okay for me to say I don't know how that all will manifest in this moment, but I just wanted to speak to that intention because, as I've said many times, our intention and our ability to choose is incredibly important. It's sort of our sacred right of incarnation, we're in a time where choice is calling us, not just in the Black Lives Matter movement, not just for justice and solidarity with people of color, but in all the other ways, we're seeing needed change manifest. As I think it's, it feels like it's all, not to get too into the big picture, but it feels like it's linked to the COVID. It feels like it's linked to our economic collapse, all the different things that we're going through, from peak oil to peak water to peak soil to peak everything, because it is peaking out. It's time now for the egg to hatch. And these things happen in ways that can be mysterious. It can also be quite acute. So I'll try to say more about that in the near future as I have something to say. I mean, as a guy who writes instrumental music, the reason I like music is because it sort of transcends words and speaks in a way as art and poetry can to the things that are so hard to speak to. And so I'll admit that it's challenging for me to just okay, I'm going to find words and I'm going to give you an opinion about this, but I don't always have that, and that's not always my strong suit, and that's why I try to do what I do. But I can just say to you now, I'll do my best, and I can do better, and I stand in solidarity with what's happening in this change. And to the people of color in my own immediate family, I obviously support them, and I want to see a better world emerging every day. Today I have a conversation I had with Dustin O'Halloran, and we had this several weeks back, so thank you to all my guests for their patience for the episodes coming out, but I try to make these episodes, the actual conversations, evergreen, meaning you could listen to them at any point in time in the future. So if you are listening to this in the future, that would certainly make sense to you. But Dustin is an amazing artist and someone that I've admired for a long time. He's got his own solo work as a pianist and a composer and a performer, and he's got a deep history composing for film and TV with a lot of high-profile projects. And he also has a side project with Adam Wiltzie called A Winged Victory for the Sullen that is kind of like an electroacoustic, ambient, contemporary classical. I mean, a lot of things that East Forest is musically too that I've deeply admired. Matter of fact, I had tickets to go to their show before COVID hit. They were going to play in March at the Old Church in Portland, which is a place that I've played, and I really like that venue because of its intimacy and its acoustics. And there aren't many bands that I would fly out to see or drive out, whatever it was going to be. And they were one of them, but unfortunately that show didn't happen. So I'm just really honored that Dustin would take the time from Iceland, as a matter of fact, is where he is now, to dig into conversation about his creation process and music. And I hope you find that valuable. And thanks for giving this podcast a review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts with a little 5 stars. You can write a written review. And even better, subscribe if you haven't already. That's a great way to show your support. And thanks for sharing the podcast on social media. It really helps us get excitement and get the guests that you want to see, and helps me feel supported for this gifted element. All right, my friends, stay strong, and thank you for sharing your voices, and thank you again for all your support, and thank you for all the work that's being done out there. Let's dig into this. This is my conversation with the one and only Dustin O'Halloran. Can you just explain to me a little bit about your international background? I mean, you're in Iceland. I've heard you were in Berlin. You were in Italy. You've also been in LA. How does this all work?
It's like a little bit of chaos, a little bit of curiosity. It's interesting. I mean, I've never really meant to be living. It was never my plan to be living in all these different places, but I think it just started with the desire to be out of America for a while, and that just sort of opened up this path to my life that just kept going. And
you're American?
Yeah, I grew up in Los Angeles, and so I had a band with singer Sara Lov. We decided to go to Italy to make a record, and we were touring. We were on a label called Bella Union. And we were touring a lot in Europe. And we went out there to make a record, and then we both decided to stay for a while, and that just turned into me staying for 7 years. And
wow.
And so and then moving to Berlin for 10 years, and then thinking that I was going to move back to Los Angeles, but now I'm here in Iceland.
Wow. Berlin. I've been to Berlin a few times. It's a great music town. It seems like a really vibrant place to be as an artist. I mean, as we both know, there's a lot of people making music sort of in the vein that you do and crossover with my own work that are in Berlin.
Yeah.
Did you feel like being there served a purpose for sort of fostering the work that you do? Maybe for the culture there, like the music scene, or just or not?
Well, no. It was a really important time, actually. I didn't realize how much I would do there, and how much just being in Berlin sort of brought so many different collaborations.
Right.
And probably one of the big reasons why I stayed for so long is we had this really beautiful kind of co-op studio situation. It was 8 studios, and I shared with Jóhann Jóhannsson and Hildur Gudnadottir, and there was just this very special community of artists, and we all had our own separate studios, but it was sort of together in this big warehouse.
Is that Funk House?
No, that's a different place. That's farther away. Those are more recording studios, and this was our own complex. It was in Kreuzberg. And
okay,
so I think that created this very special atmosphere, and we were collaborating. And also, I have this project with another composer in Belgium, in Brussels. It's called A Winged Victory for the Sullen. And Brussels and Berlin, it's about an hour on flight. It's so close, and so that was another project that's been very active, and we just jumping on planes and going over there and working. And over there we have these string players called the Echo Collective, and they started working with us, and they eventually worked with Jóhann, and it was just all this big community of people that in Europe that we all connected. And my longtime sound collaborator, Francesco Donadello, who I met while living in Italy, he moved to Berlin. He started a studio, and he's become sort of the epicenter for a lot of, he worked with Jóhann. He helped Jóhann develop a lot of sounds. He's done all of my records, all of the Winged Victory for the Sullen records. He worked with Hildur Gudnadottir and helping her with, doing a lot of sound. He's like kind of a sound research. He goes much beyond just a mixer. And so
In what ways? Like, what is he doing beyond the mixing?
Well, he helps develop techniques like analog techniques, and he created some really he was creating tape machines that would be hooked up to a modular synthesizer and could play the pitch of a tape. I mean, he was doing crazy scientific stuff, very experimental but scientific, and he's just so a lot of people coming to him to record and explore, and there's just been Berlin was just this sort of energy of exploration and sound, and then all of us were also working. A lot of us working on film scores as well. So,
and was that a conscious choice for you to get into film scoring, or did opportunities come your way, and that became a part of your life?
Well, I think I've always had a big fascination with film and film music, and I think that's always been something that I loved. It was always a big influence, even when I was playing in a band. It was always something that I Morricone and this, just this. It's been, I don't know. It's kind of had its own path in music. I think that is really interesting. And so I think I was always pulled towards it, but I didn't really. It came to me sort of naturally. I wasn't seeking it out. I was making my own records, and the first time I worked with film was with Sofia Coppola for Marie Antoinette, and that was
it's a great first thing.
And and that was just because I was making piano music in a in a village in Italy. It wasn't. I was so far from Hollywood or anything. So things have happened. My life is definitely a series of serendipitous events that continue. But obviously, it's just what you're putting out that brings things to you. So,
do you find that when you write? Because I think writing for film or picture in general is kind of tough, because there's a very, like, they have specific needs, and you're essentially trying to serve the picture and working with the director, and so you have these constraints. And do you find that doing that versus making music that's just for you, that you're releasing under your name, or just music that's just a creative ask you, it's just for that, like a Winged Victory for a Sullen or something, that there's those limitations of working for film? Like, do you find that, in a sense, like, I'm sure it's satisfying, but is it creatively stifling at all?
I mean, it's
like, it doesn't get, you don't get to express something as pure.
Well, it's a little bit of both, and I think that as you sort of go deeper down the rabbit hole of film scoring, you start to understand it as a way of life differently than in the beginning. In the beginning, my first scores were more like records in a way, because people really wanted something specific from me, and a lot of the music that I would write was not to picture, and they would just use it in their film. But as I started to get into a more serious role of composing for film, the compromises become bigger and the limitations become bigger. But then you get to explore things that you wouldn't explore in your own music. Right. But it's, I've had an interesting path, because I've been able to have a chance to record with really big orchestras, to do things that I probably wouldn't have done with my own music, and I learned a lot from doing that. But I think at the end, there's a lot of compromise. So I think that I personally am sort of pulling back and I'm starting to work on my own music again. And I think that it's something you have to kind of protect.
Yeah, because is writing for film, I would imagine, pretty lucrative if you can get into the factory getting those jobs. I would imagine, compared to creating our own music and just releasing it.
Yeah, and I think it is work, and I think if you're coming from a place where you're just used to working, you can kind of easily just fall into that and go, all right, I'm just going to do this, and it's good work. But you can lose your way a little bit in it, because you serve a film and you learn to write serving a film, which is what it needs, but it also, you start to lose touch with your own intuition. So I think it's important that you step away from it from time to time and just kind of get in touch with your intuition again. And that's sort of.
But tell me more about that. Like, what is that thing you think you're losing touch with? That intuition that you are then, I'm assuming, saying you're more in touch with it when you're writing music that isn't a picture.
Yeah. Well,
what is that?
Well, picture and film inherently is a square. It's a box that has this. You start with a script that has a defined story. You create an edit which has defined start and end points. There's parameters, and it has to sort of live in this box. And it becomes a part of something else. It lives inside of a story.
The constraints of that, in a sense.
Yeah.
The constraints of a story, the constraints of there's a start and an end. Right,
and then, timeline, and then the constraints of the imagination of the producer and the director and everybody involved. So, you learn to navigate. You develop. Your intuition starts to shift towards understanding the needs of all of that, rather than just how you write for yourself. And you always should pull from yourself, but it gets complicated. I think that it can create a lot of frustration, because your instincts may differ, be different than the directors. And that's where, that's where when you meet directors where you're really in line together, it's very rare and special. And a lot of composer-director relationships are very sacred, and they only work together, I think, because obviously music is a huge role with a lot of filmmakers. So.
Yeah, I remember way back in college taking a class on music and film, and I remember this idea that music is the thing that takes a two-dimensional medium and makes it three-dimensional. It literally takes that picture in front of you on the screen, and through the sound waves is connecting it to the body.
Yeah.
And it's sort of the thread that takes the person to the story.
Yeah. It's interesting. I recently worked on a film that had very little music. It was only about 20 minutes of music, which is very rare in this day and age where everything feels like it needs to be filled with music. And it was really nice and refreshing that he wanted to, let the story play out mostly without it. And I really appreciated that space. And the film is called Antoinette. It has Kate Winslet and Saoirse Ronan. I think that's how you say it. But it's these are really rare directors, and I think it's really nice when you work with somebody that just gives a lot of space. And I actually really like the fact that there doesn't have to be music all the time, and I think that finding a way for it to be three-dimensional without music is a really is a skill challenge for filmmakers.
So when you're making music for yourself, quote unquote, what is the thing that you are trying to get in touch with? Like, what is the litmus test for you that's like, there it is. Like, that's what I want to engage with in the music? Or is there a consistent theme there or feeling?
Well, I think that's what I describe as your intuition, when you actually really are feeling connected. And I think that every musician knows that feeling. And, and I think writers and anybody who creates art from nothing understands that. Anybody that's looking for that feeling of, it's just this moment where you feel connected. And it's probably a little bit different for everybody, but I think that it's it's that sense that when you know that it's right for you. And
Yeah, I totally know what you're saying.
yeah, and I think that it's being in touch with that is something that has to be cultivated and nurtured and takes time. And it's I think it's just all, it's sort of the birthplace of all art, is coming from that desire to create and trusting your intuition and being very open and free to
And there's a compassion with it for me, because I know it's such an ebb and flow. You know, you get in spaces where you are in that space where you feel like you're in that flow, and then spaces where you feel like you're not.
Yeah.
It feels like a mental game more than anything. And if anything, I've learned over time how to let go of the negativity and be like, look, it's okay. Sometimes you fall off the wagon, and I know that tomorrow I'll get back on. And sometimes, you know, it feels great, and sometimes it doesn't. And you just like, I have to just be like, I'm not going to give that too much credence.
Mm-hmm.
To say that this won't work, or I don't have ideas, or this, you know, every project goes through those ups and downs and ups and downs and lefts and rights. And that is the process.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I think it's an interesting moment now, because I'm sort of spending time with my daughter, and I'm not, you know, I'm sort of taking a little bit of a break from music, and you know, just and letting that be okay. I'm usually usually have a lot going on, a lot of projects, and it's just you know, just being okay to step away for a little while.
Yeah, as I told you when we were scheduling this, I had tickets for your show, Wing Victory for the Sullen show in Portland, Oregon, because you're playing at the old church, which I've played at, and it's such a beautiful venue. And I was like, oh, that'd be a perfect place to see you guys. I've never seen you play, and that was postponed or canceled along with everything else in the world. And I don't know about you, but this time has been. And I think like this opportunity is there for everyone. It's a kind of opportunity for rebirth or reinvention, where maybe even just like some of the more subtle, tender parts of our lives, like you're talking about spending time with your daughter, is there for the taking in a sense. It's like letting us step into it more fully. And then you can probably ask yourself as we move forward from this, what do I want to keep? You know?
Yeah. Well, it's such an interesting time because people aren't able to spend as much money as they usually do because everything's closed. And so what do you need to survive? What's really necessary? And I think probably a lot of people are realizing that just having a simple life actually is really, really nice. Cooking your own food and just being a little more self-sufficient and less, capitalistic is actually a much more relaxed feeling. So
yeah, it's like getting back to our roots of being human outside of this hyper speed digitized world we've been in. I'd imagine you've been very busy over the last 10 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I feel that there's been I have a lot of projects and I enjoy doing multiple things, but the speed of how they move is felt really fast to me, and I feel like I actually really love doing one thing really well at a time, and I found the last few years to be a little bit overwhelming in the sense that there was so many things happening and how quickly they needed to happen, and it's just it's nice to feel that maybe I'm just gonna use this time to sort of lay out things a little bit slower and take it a little bit slower and be okay with that.
Yeah, why not? Right? It's maybe that is a kind of personal choice to set the timeline, or versus the timeline sets it for you.
And a lot of that I think is based on how we build our like our needs, and if you're able to live a little bit more simpler and a little cheaper, it gives you more freedoms to take things slower, and I think that's probably a lot of people are feeling that and realizing that. They're like realizing, I didn't need 5 subscriptions of this, and I didn't need to have all those coffees, and making coffee at home is fine. And then you realize you've saved so much money, and what you get back is time. And that,
I have a lot of friends who speak to this. I have a spot I live in southern Utah, which is like, it's nothing there. It's just about being on the land, and a lot of people choose to be there because they didn't want to be part of that other life. And one of my friends has a great phrase. I mean, these are guys, some of them literally live in like yurts with their family, or some of them live in caves for a while.
Yeah.
And he always says he's time rich. He's like, I'm time rich. What do you want to do? Oh, sure, let's do it. Oh, you want to hang out for the day? Okay.
Yeah.
And that's their barometer of wealth.
Yeah.
Is how much they can enjoy just the moment.
Yeah.
And not be running anywhere.
Yeah. That's true.
But they don't have a lot of money. But they design their life where they're like, well, I work as little as I can so that I can not. So I guess I can just be.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it's, I think, if you're a creative person, and you need certain channels to put your work out there, there's a certain inherent connection to the modern world that you may need, but
of course,
but I really respect everybody's decisions. And I think but overall, I think just this whole global pullback, I hope, brings a little more awareness and a little more peace to people. I mean, a lot of people are having a hard time as well. So, obviously, like, certain people are just privileged to be able to have time. Some people are, in very dire situations. But I think, hopefully it just brings communities together and people can help each other more. But
yeah. And you're in Iceland, right?
Yeah.
And that's where your family lives there, or you also spend time there?
Well, my partner's Icelandic, and I have, because I shared a studio in Berlin with a lot of Icelandic people, I sort of ended up knowing, a bit of the Icelandic music community here.
It's quite a community.
Yeah, it's crazy how such a small island, and such as, there's only 310,000 Icelanders. Like, there's how many talented people are here.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
Maybe you're just going there to drink the water so you can become like an even better musician. That's what I always thought. I've been there 4 times and performed a couple times there, and I always had the same thought as you. It's like, why is there such a high proportion of incredible music coming out of this place?
Well, it kind of goes back to what you were saying. I mean, here, just because of the small community and how small of a town it is, people are time rich more than other places, because there's a lot less distractions, and you're not going to just jump on a plane so easily and go somewhere, because it is a bit of a travel to leave Iceland, and you end up having a lot of time. I mean, I find that everything you do in your day is very, the distance it's a tiny city. So
it is small, and you're never really outside nature too. I mean, even in Reykjavik, you can always see around you, and you don't ever feel like man has taken over like in other cities.
Yeah, I mean, there's something about the horizons that you see, and driving out, you feel, I don't know, there's a sense of time and space here that you just feel, and it's very relaxed. So I think that's a big part of why there's a lot of great music here. People have time to just sort of, and the weather's not great a lot of the year, so you have nothing more to do than just sit in your studio and become, a great guitar player or pianist or whatever it is you're doing, a great sculptor. There's a lot of artisans here, and I think that just the nature of this place just lends itself to that.
When I was there, I also had a discovery, and maybe you can verify this for me, but someone gave me a jar of psychedelic mushrooms that they said were just growing. They dried them. Like, this is what grows here, and you can have this. Like, oh. And then another guy, like, I remember there's this really falafel spot in Reykjavik near that little square, that little tiny square.
Oh, yeah.
That spot.
Yeah, that's good.
Good good place. And I was in there, and this guy comes in, and I kind of like opened the door for him, and we had this strange moment. He was acting really weird and giving this weird grin to me.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, I think he's tripping, and then like I played a show, and the guy who opened for me was tripping, like as he played. But I'm sure you know him. He wouldn't mind. Tater Magnuson. That guy?
I don't know him actually.
Oh, he's makes really cool, funny music. Anyway, big, long, kind of reddish hair.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just realized that like these things are growing all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Just so you're walking to work, and it might be like not that weird to pick. I'll just pick one and eat it. Maybe it's like a microdose in a sense. And then I started thinking about the history there of like leprechauns and that kind of underworld stuff. And I was like, oh, now it makes sense, because for millennia they've probably just been dropping in, and of course you do hear the earth. You do.
Yeah.
You get closer to the landscape that way. It's a way of sort of your own divination and education. And so I felt that was a part of the culture and the landscape there, and dropping you probably further into the mystical and nature.
Yeah.
That I hadn't really previously thought about. And maybe that had something to do with the creative spirit. In addition to, it's very egalitarian socially, and like you said, it's not a lot of distractions.
Yeah.
I think they had good music education in the school, but the mushrooms, man, they're all over.
I know they are. And also there's even the non-psychedelic ones are just growing everywhere that you can pick and eat as well. If you're for mushroom people, I was working with an assistant here, and he was a big, I think mushroom people are particular people.
They are, yeah.
And he was going out and picking these great mushrooms. I don't know much about them, and I would never do it because I probably would just die. But he was picking great mushrooms and cooking with them, and he was really into it. They're just everywhere, all over the city at certain times of the year.
Yeah, man, I was doing a podcast with Peter Broderick, and he says his favorite thing to do is to forage.
Yeah, you can really forage out here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, Iceland seems like, to me, I know the weather can be kind of shit, but I don't know. I really love the people there, and it seems like a really cool place to be doing music.
Yeah.
I mean, I know the limitations of getting gear and all that kind of stuff. It's nothing like Berlin, but there is some amazing music that's been coming out of there, no doubt.
Yeah. No, it's not a bad place to be, especially in this crazy moment in time. So I do feel lucky.
Did you bring all your gear there, or do you keep it there, like pianos? How does this work for you?
Well, I brought my studio gear from Berlin, and I still have to set it up, but I was about to ship my piano. It's still supposed to come, but things have just been delayed because of COVID. So, but the plan is to bring my piano that I had in Berlin here.
Okay. And can we talk gear a little bit? I would be remiss if I didn't. I don't want to go too deep down it, but I'm always interested in like what kind of. I know you do a lot of upright stuff in your studio, and what kind of techniques do you like for recording that? As far as just your microphone setups, do you do a lot of close miking, or?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm always sort of experimenting. I have these vintage AKG microphones that they have a C12 capsule. It's one of the early versions. They're a tube, and those sound really beautiful. I love Cole's microphones as well. And
they're not too noisy for you, or?
Well, I usually use them with a mix of. I'll use Shoops as well with them, and when I work with Francesco, he's always experimenting with different microphones. But when we record Grand, we're usually using a pair of U67s, which I really love. And but yeah, I mean, I kind of have a collection of vintage microphones, and the hi-fi microphones that I usually go to are the Shoops. But I usually use those always sort of in tandem to vintage microphones. I really enjoy the Gefälls, which are the East German version of Neumann, and those are really cool. They're kind of lo-fi but hi-fi. They're they always have a very special sound. And
I have a I think it's called UMT 87 or 40. Wait, what's it called? It's sort of like it's got like basically a 47 type capsule, but it's a FET mic.
Yeah.
I like that. It's very, very like clean and standard.
Yeah.
But I use it a lot for vocal mics. But I wish I had a matched pair for piano.
Yeah. I mean, I've been kind of getting more into the Gefäls. I think they're very interesting mics, especially for how much they are. And it's just good to have a lot of different colors.
No doubt. So you've done some collaborations, lots of collaborations, whether for scoring, but also with the Winged Victory for Sullen and others. What's the value for you of collaborating? I mean, I know for me, it's like I always learn so much from working with someone else, but then there's also the limitations, but those can be great. I mean, limitations in general sometimes seem like a must for creating anything. Otherwise, it's just a sea of choice.
Yeah, no, I'm the same. I sort of need limitations to be really creative.
Do you set them yourself sometimes? I mean, sometimes they come to you, like a film score is filled with limitations.
Yeah. I kind of, I'll sit down and, sometimes I'll get crazy and just break out all the pedals and, this and whatever synths. But I tend to keep it a little bit more analog. And that's just gives a natural limitation. I think the digital world for me is maybe just too many choices. So I sort of start, I usually start everything analog, even if it's electronic, it usually starts either with pedals or a modular synth or something that that naturally just has limitations in a way because it is what it is. And then I start there, a piano, string quartet, and then if I do anything afterwards, I'll use specific tools. But at least I have something that's got a direction, and that's usually always starts with an analog source. So that I find that's for me a better process. But it's really, I think I kind of, obviously, if I'm sitting down and I know I'm going to write a piece for piano, it's just going to be that, and I'll let it just be that. Sometimes I know I might want to embellish with strings, or it goes on different paths, but I guess in some way I sort of start with natural limitations.
Do you kind of start from a place of improvisation? Like, what's that creative process like for you when you're in the beginning genesis of music?
Yeah. I mean, sometimes it's just, I might want to explore a sound, and maybe that will develop into a piece of music. And that might be me just wanting to, like, I want to explore the Prophet 5 and I just start digging into it. And that just ends up sort of being, a piece of music just gets created from that. I mean, the genesis of a piece of music is always starting from some sort of improvisation or experimentation. I think that's for everybody. And, maybe I feel like piano is maybe a little bit different because the instrument is what it is. And so you sit down and you start to improvise and then carve things out. But it's, piano is always the piano. I mean, I think that the piano is a special way that I work, in the sense that I don't record anything until I've finished a piece. And so I write with the memory of what I'm doing, and it always sort of goes into memory. And I find that if I can't remember it, then it's really usually not worth keeping. So I use my memory as a way to sort of, it's like a filter, and then I don't record it until the end. So I'm not recording a bunch of improvisations and then building a piece from that. I'm usually just playing, and then when something sort of starts to form, I'll come back to it. I'll build on it. And these big long pieces are just done that way, and then I won't record them until I know it. And usually when I know it, I remember it for years. So it's
that's interesting.
Yeah,
Huh.
yeah.
I think it was Regina Spektor said that's how she wrote too. Like she'd write something, and then if she could remember it the next day, she knew it had something special, and she'd keep working on it.
Yeah,
that'd be scary because what if it's a real trust,
well,
and like your memory, you're unconscious in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I find if I read music, I don't remember it because it's accessing a different part of my brain. I have a hard time remembering pieces if I'm reading sheets. But if I just play it and I internalize it, then I remember it much longer. It's like I don't know, it gets stored somewhere else.
Well, I read you say once that inspiration was a way of kind of transferring ideas for you. Do you remember that? Or can you speak more to what that feeling is for you? As opposed to being inspired by other music or inspired by others. Versus, the idea of like, everyone says like, how, what do you listen to? What are you inspired by? But it's sort of like, I always think that, well, I'm inspired by everything I hear. And inevitably when let's say I hear a piece and I'm sort of like, I go to write music and I'm almost like pulling from that. It comes out in a very different way, but it's being filtered through my own creative process, I suppose.
Well, I think, music is such a chain. I mean, all art is a chain. It's a link. There's links of the chain. It's this long chain that is just going in both directions. It's being created and it goes into the past. And I think that we're always pulling from something that was built before. I think that that's the nature of music, is that there's been, nobody's pulling things just out of the air that never existed. I mean, there's always some DNA of something else. And I think that that's sort of the beautiful thing too, is that maybe it's just a feeling. Maybe it's just there's certain music that resonates with you, and that feeling you want to transfer into your own music. And you want that part of the chain to continue. And I think that maybe it's a form, maybe there's a technique or something that you take the DNA of and you build on it. And it was something that actually maybe we did a little bit scientifically. That was a happy accident that actually informed a way to work, which was Adam and I, as a wing victory for the Sullen, did a remix of Jóhann's. And he sent us he was re-releasing Engleborn, and he was doing some remixes. And so he sent us this track, which was basically just a stereo recording of a quartet in a church. There was no separation. It was just a stereo recording. And so we were thinking, how do you remix something that's beautiful and just a stereo? There wasn't anything to kind of pull out of it. So what we did was we basically took the track and ran it through a program called Melodyne, which basically gives you all of the information, the notes. And we basically sort of mapped out the whole chordal DNA of the piece. And then we started to deconstruct it and kind of pull out different pieces and then send that information through a modular synth, through all these different things. I did piano parts, and we basically created a new piece of music, but from the DNA of the actual notes. And when we were working on our new record, The Undivided Five, I kind of wanted to explore that a little bit more, but instead of taking MIDI information, I thought, well, why don't we just go back even farther and go back to some sheet music, and just, because that's basically the same thing as MIDI information in a way. It's, the notes.
Old school MIDI, yeah.
So we took a piece, there's a single bar of Debussy, and I thought, there's so much information sometimes in some of these old works. I mean, a single bar of Bach is so filled with so much incredible DNA. There's so many amazing chordal, if it's just like a passing chord, but like what's happening can be so incredible. But it happens so fast. It goes by so fast because there's just inherently a lot of that music just was moving much quickly and you barely catch it. And I thought, what if you just take this single bar and just expand it and just blow it up and take 6 chords, and we just sort of pulled all the notes and the DNA from these 6 chords of a single bar and created a 10-minute piece of music.
Wow.
And
wow, which piece is that? That's the remix?
No, it's the first track on the new record. It's called Our Lord Debussy.
Wow.
Yeah, and so that's basically pulled from the DNA of this bar of music, and we just did variations. We did different, just kind of finding the beautiful harmonics in there, and recording strings, and it's a really interesting way to work, because I think that in the past, that's a lot of people did that consciously, subconsciously, but I think it's a really beautiful way to start making music and take a little piece of the chain. But it's pulling something good. It's not trying to copy something. And I think that that's an important part of music, is that people do, there is this shared, I'm not protective of, if somebody takes some, ideas from what we do, I'm not protective in that way. I feel like music has to be expanded on, and I mean, hip hop wouldn't exist without that. So, I mean, I think that there's so many great things that are pulled from other sources. So I think it's a healthy way to be creative.
Is there anything that you've been really inspired by lately?
It's funny. I'm working on so much music these last years. I actually haven't been listening to a lot of music. I have a lot of friends and I'll listen to their records, but I'm not seeking out as much music as I used to. I have my vinyl player at home, and I tend to listen to for some reason, I'm just listening to old jazz on vinyl.
Yeah, me too. On vinyl, as I listen to it.
So
Patrick Carney from the Black Keys, he's like, you really, if you think about it with your vinyl, usually you have like, I don't know, 15 to 20 records you listen to just over and over again.
Yeah. So, I'm listening to a lot of Miles Davis, and
I get deep into Keith Jarrett's vinyl. He has so many vinyl.
Yeah.
They're usually pretty cheap. So if I ever see one, I buy it. And some of them are really weird, but I dig it.
Soundtrack, I love like 60s Italian soundtracks. Those are great on vinyl. But I mean, I'm not, I'm kind of in a moment where I'm not listening to a ton of music. I just working on music all day. I find silence actually really, really great. Iceland is a really windy place, and the sound of the wind is one of the most beautiful sounds. The house just shakes, and you hear the wind howling, and I really love it.
Where in Iceland are you?
In Reykjavik.
Okay. Yeah, I have a friend there that I got to know over the years who owns a yoga studio in town, and Tomas, he's a great guy. So many great people there.
Yeah.
So with all these shifts and change and where your career's been at, you've written such amazing music and all these amazing collaborations. It seems like you're going through a bit of a shift of location again, and obviously with COVID.
Yeah.
What are you excited for, or are you seeing something come to shape of where you see the future of music and for yourself?
Well, I just finished. I was supposed to be on tour, as you said, with Winged Victory, and we finished that record, and that was a really interesting experience. I mean, the shows have been great, and hopefully we'll get to come back and do the U.S. tour. And I think that, the records that Adam and I have done, I'm really proud of that the record that came out. It was a big process, and I learned a lot. And I think sonically, I'm really happy with how it came out. So I feel like that especially the last 5 to 6 years, I've put a lot of energy into that project. And so now I feel
it's a great project, man. I mean, it's so beautiful. Yeah.
And so I think with the completion of this record, I feel like I have a little bit more space to start to focus on my own music, which I haven't done in a while. And I'm excited about that. Just kind of getting back to exploring what I want to do. And I have some ideas, but I'm also really open right now. And I think it's been so long. So many musical projects I've done in the last 5-6 years have been collaborations. So it's going to be, it's like getting to know myself at this point in my life again. And with everything, living in a new place and having a child, there's just been such major life changes. So it's going to be, you just have to kind of it's like getting to know yourself again. And but I definitely have a new record that I'm going to be working on, and I signed a new record deal with Deutsche Grammophon. So,
great.
There is, that's coming, and I just need to sort of sit down and get into it.
Well, you know what I'm hearing from you is that what the blessing is that you need time to do something like that and allow it to happen over a time scale, like you were saying, that maybe doesn't feel rushed.
Yeah.
And maybe what's great right now is that you're time rich.
Yeah. It was interesting. My first records that I made in Italy, I was very time rich. I was in a small town, and I just was sitting at the piano and there was no film scores. There's nothing sort of over me, pushing me to finish. And I think that I realized I hear the time in those recordings. I can feel it. I can feel time. And I think that is what I love about those records that I made living there. And I feel like it's something that I want to get back to, because I think that somehow it's also the music that lasts the longest when you give it time. I
hate to say this, but it's true. It's timeless. I mean,
but you feel, I think
giving it time creates a timelessness.
Yeah. I mean, jazz musicians, I think, live in another sensibility of time. It's always about capturing the moment, but at the same time, they're always, working on, they're always like in this direction. And I think to carve out music, to compose it, is more, it's like sculpting. It takes time. You got to sit back and look at it. You need to think about it. And your things are born from improvisation, but you really sculpt it to a finite shape. And that's, I think, what really beautiful, timeless composition is that's the beauty of it. I think there's a beauty in jazz and capturing a moment, but the other side of it is carving out something that will stand the test of time. So that's finding that balance.
Well, that's inspiring me, because I mean, I have recordings that go from either end of the spectrum, where something that's literally a recording of an improvisational thing. I did this Music for Mushrooms album. That was a 5-hour improvisation, but it's just that. And then it is what it is, versus a studio record that you could work on for many months.
Yeah. And I think they're both, they're two different approaches. And I think they're both can be really, produce interesting results. It's just, one just needs more time, and the other is it's just the moment. So.
No doubt. Well, I for one am very interested to see what comes out and to hear what you create, but take your time.
I'm going to try.
No rush.
I'm going to try.
No rush.
Well, if the world just stays like this, it's going to be in my favor.
Yeah, there's the silver lining for all of us. It's a very interesting gift that is inside the bitter medicine of this experience. And for each of us, it's to be cultivated in the way that we choose to cultivate it.
Yeah.
But, I'm excited for you too.
Thanks. Thank you. Yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back into it.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your time. This seems like a good place to bring the conversation to a close.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me.
Yeah, man. And hope we can do it again. And it's been a pleasure getting to know you.
Thank you very much. Well, good luck to you over there.
Thank you.
And stay safe and keep, make some music during this time.
Well, thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us. It was just a total honor for me to be able to talk to him, and I'm really hoping we can do it again. Definitely check out his music. His solo piano stuff is just beautiful, and A Winged Victory for the Sullen is the next level, and he's got the film scores. He's a lot of things going on, and if you aren't familiar with his work, I'm glad you are now. This track you're hearing in the background is called Our Lord Debussy by Dustin O'Halloran. Lovely, beautiful. If you want to hear it in its full glory and all of his music in high fidelity, please do so where you listen to music, as these podcasts are kind of low bit rate. But I'm really honored we could have this track as part of this podcast right here. Thanks again for reviewing the podcast. If you haven't done it, you can do it more than once on Apple Podcasts. It helps us get the guests you want to see. Please subscribe. And thank you for all the support of the merch you guys buy or the messages you send and the sharing you do on social media. It means a lot to me to feel, especially that I'm in a community now in these times where I don't get to see you guys too much on the road. It's even more valuable to me. So thank you, thank you, thank you. You guys keep walking your walk. Don't take any shit. But if you do it with grace.